Hello, Mr. Hennessy.
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you? How's your day been so far?
It's been great. It's a beautiful day in California, so
Well, it's such an honor and a privilege to host you on the show today. Welcome to Teddy Talk TV. This is mainly a kids show. It's started by kids for kids. And let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Neetu Prabhu. I'm the CEO and founder of Unity Wealth Strategies. But today, I'm mainly here just to help these children. I'm here to help them with setting and managing the show. And they are the hosts of the show. They've prepared the show. They've been doing it ever since they were little, and now they are freshmen at Penn and Wharton. And we are going to be talking to Gia, Arman, and Karina Gupta. They're the Gupta triplets. So I'm going to hand over the mic to them. They're pretty much going to ask you all the questions that they have actually collected from a lot of children around the world. So we're really looking forward to this session. It's going to be an exciting and a very inspiring session. And for all of you kids, it's from nobody except for the granddaddy of who we call from the Silicon Valley. So the godfather of Silicon Valley. Gia, take over.
Thank you so much, Neetu. Just for a quick introduction, my name is Jia Gupta. My siblings and I founded Little Mentors more than 4 years ago with the basis of creating a platform to create connections worldwide. Welcome to Teddy Talks, one of our projects dedicated to creating engaging conversations with remarkable individuals, who are pushing boundaries and redefining leadership in today's world.
My name is Karina Gupta, and today we are honored to be speaking with the true pioneer in both academia and Silicon Valley, John Hennessy. Mr. Hennessy is the former president of Stanford University, the chairman of Alphabet, and has been heralded as the godfather of Silicon Valley.
And I'm Arman. For today's show, we'll be discussing his incredible journey, the leadership insights, and thoughts on the future of innovation. Mr. Hennessy, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you.
my pleasure. Delighted to be here.
So to start off today's talk, before we dive into your leadership roles, I always like to start with the personal question. So first, can you tell us about a key moment from your childhood or early career that you think shaped your journey and your leadership style now?
Well, I'd say in my love of learning and my love of reading came from my mother. At the time when I was young, my father worked in the defense industry, and at that time it was the early days of the Cold War. And believe it or not, engineers worked 3 shifts a day. So my father would regularly be working at night doing engineering design. And so my mother became my initial reader, but later on my encourager. She's the one that encouraged me to really get a love of reading, and it's stuck with me to this day. So I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I found it really valuable.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We're all voracious readers as well. And I know you talked about your mother, but could you speak a little bit more about some of your earlier mentors and how they impacted your approach to leadership?
Sure. I posted for my first 8 grades, K through 8. I didn't work very hard. I wasn't really enthusiastic about school. I was kind of bored, actually, I think, really. I was a person that upset the teachers because I wouldn't do my homework and then I would get an A on the test anyway, and it didn't make them happy. And then I had a high school math teacher who said to me, at a parent-teacher conference, she said, John has a very fine mind, but he has a lazy mind. And she said, you're not working very hard. You're not working up to your ability because of that. And she said, I'll make a deal with you. If you promise to work hard, I'll let you take both algebra and geometry at the same time and move ahead in math courses so you could take more advanced courses. And I did. And I found a real joy in being challenged like that and in doing math. And that later on became my foundation for becoming a computer scientist. So it was a really valuable lesson and opportunity she provided me to really do that.
Honestly, I think I relate because like my sister and I were both engineers, and I think that's probably in the blood of engineers just to explore, to build projects. I know you mentioned you did a science fair. We also did the science fair, and like
Yeah.
even this week I had like some homework assignments due for my computer science class. But I mean, obviously I completed them, but I guess as a mode of procrastination, I made like a little robot. But like I believe like what you're saying is something that I can definitely relate to. But like what I'm wondering is like sometimes like for example in high school I would spend a lot of my time doing robotics, right? And that would sometimes drain my time away from school into these other activities. So what I'm wondering is how did you balance like practical considerations? Like how do I get a job? How do I like what will my future look like with what your passions are? So how do you find the intersection of those two things?
Yeah, I started out, as an engineer. I started as an electrical engineering major. Believe it or not, you could not major in computer science in the United States when I started. There were no computer science undergraduate majors. There were graduate programs, but no undergraduate majors. So I started out in electrical engineering, but focused on computers. I think I originally thought, I'll get my bachelor's degree and then I'll go to work. And two things really changed my trajectory. One was an opportunity to do some teaching and problems, helping young people learning their first programming, freshmen learning their first programming, sometimes freshmen, sometimes sophomores, learning their first programming course, and really help them teach that in problem solving sections and things. And I found I really loved helping people learn things. And then I got a chance to work in an undergraduate research lab, and that really stirred my love of research. And then I decided I'm going to go get a PhD. And from the day I started my PhD, I thought I'm going to become a professor, and that was my goal all along.
It seems like your path was interwoven with a lot of pivots and like going into different directions you didn't expect yourself to be going in. So, whether it's something you already mentioned or something that happens later on in your journey, if you could pinpoint a time in your life when you had to unlearn something fundamental, what would that be and how did it shape the way you lead today?
Well, you know what I had to do. I originally didn't start out to be an entrepreneur. I had done some consulting for a startup that spun out of Stanford that one of my colleagues had started, but I was enjoying my academic life, and I would spend a day a week down at this startup company. But I was going to stick to academia. And when we published our papers on the MIPS project, which eventually became Reduced Instruction Set Computing, um, we published the papers. We thought these are such obviously good ideas that people in industry will just pick them up and run with them. And that's not what happened. In fact, several companies actually canceled their projects that built on this technology. So I got together with another colleague who was at Stanford and working there in a postdoctoral position, and then a colleague who I knew who worked at one of the other microprocessor companies. And along came somebody and said, a famous computer pioneer, and said, "Look, you need to start a company. This technology it's too revolutionary. It's too discontinuous. It's going to obsolete all the existing products of these companies. The only way you're going to get it out there is if you start a company." So we had a conversation and decided to do it. What I had to learn were all the things about what it means to start a company. How do they work financially? What are you looking for when you hire a CEO? We were three engineers. We didn't know anything about building a company. And the only thing that saved us in the end was that the technology was so good and the team was so good, because we made a lot of mistakes. So my first time around, I just, I wish I had had somebody with an MBA on that core team that could have really helped me do the other things. So I made a lot of mistakes the first time. Second time around, I did it. Well, I knew a lot more the second time around, so I didn't repeat the same mistakes.
So in that initial conversation, when people were telling you that in order to pursue this technology, you had to create a company. Do you think you were sort of immediately drawn to that risk, or do you think you were kind of hesitant to continue down that path?
Well, it was an interesting time because I was also going to come up for tenure at the university. So I didn't know where my path was going to go exactly. And but I had participated in this other startup called Silicon Graphics that my colleague Jim Clark had started, and he actually said you should start a company to do this. We would love this technology, but we can't. We got to stay focused on our core mission. But if you built a company, we would love to buy the technology. So those kinds of things helped me get over with it. And I figured if it didn't work, I always had my university job to fall back on. So it gave me some comfort in that regard.
You have a really interesting path in that someone else kind of told you to start a company, which is very unique for a lot of undergraduates I'm even talking to, where they have the reverse mindset where they want to start a company and they don't have an idea yet.
Right.
Talk a
This is
little.
this is a good question because this is what comes up all the time. I meet with undergraduates all the time. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to
Yeah,
tell me about your idea, or tell me about your breakthrough technology. Well, I don't have it yet. I said,
yeah.
come back when you have it. Come back.
Yeah, wait, could you expand on that a little more? Do you think it's possible to start a startup or a business just with, do you think you could just like, I know I've heard like a lot of VC firms saying they invest in the founder, not necessarily the technology. Could you talk a little bit about what you think are the right ingredients or the best time to start a startup? Does the idea really matter that much? Whatever your thoughts are on that.
It depends on what kind of startup you want to have. I mean, if you're looking for something that does a minor, maybe finds a hole in some product line and builds a product that fits in that space, and that you're then hoping to be acquired early on, then I think you can think about how to do that. If you want to create a startup that changes the world, like a Google or something, you better have some technology. You better have a key insight to really, or you can be a first mover. You can be, it can be I mean, eBay and Facebook are really first mover companies. They get into a field early on. Social media wasn't well established. Facebook got started. They really did a good job on execution, so they were very successful. eBay fulfilled a need that wasn't out there. So I think there are lots of different models. The thing to be careful about is there were about 20 different, no more than that, there were more than 50 companies doing photo sharing that got funded by venture capitals, right? One or two of them, one was very successful, Instagram. Flickr was moderate, and Picasa were moderately successful, and most of the others went broke. So that was an idea that didn't have a lot of depth to it, didn't have a lot of technology core that would make you distinct. So that's an issue to think about.
So another thing is like, I guess for a lot of students, I guess the students at Stanford who are obviously very ambitious, the question arises, should I start up? Should I just keep going and just chase Silicon Valley and create startups in college? Or should I try to go more of like the research route, be at the forefront of innovation, as like Paul Graham says, and then create a startup once I have a understanding of the field? Do you think both like paradigms are viable?
Yeah, I think both are viable. I think there's actually a third route, namely go join a well-run technical company, learn a lot more about how products are developed and shipped out to the market, because that's something students don't usually appreciate, what has to happen to get a product really out there that gets a user community that's excited or sells to a business. So I think all three routes can work. The companies that really change the world, I'm more interested in companies that really change the world in some fundamental way, and they're often linked to, they're not necessarily, but they're often linked to a technology innovation. And then getting a PhD to really be at the forefront of a field is key. Lots of Sergey and Larry, when they started Google, didn't finish their PhD, but they would have never done the algorithm that led to Google without chasing a PhD, without having that as a goal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you just talked about speaks to how there are a lot of different routes when it comes to entrepreneurship, but there definitely, even despite so many successful founders having so many different paths, there are some certain characteristics or just variables that help some founders become more successful than others. And one thing that I've definitely noticed is that so many successful entrepreneurs come out of Stanford. And given your like high role and a lots of experience within Stanford, could you talk a little bit about what makes Stanford environment such a breeding ground for innovation and startup culture?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it comes down to a few things. First of all, there are a lot of students who are pursuing cutting edge research at the frontier of things, who are going to make discoveries and find things that are key insights. Secondly, one of the things that we've done over the last 25 years is to build a strong curriculum around entrepreneurship. And we did this, I mean, as I said, when I started my first company, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I didn't know what a gross margin was. There were so many things I didn't know. I didn't know why we needed sales. I figured this product is so great, people will just come buy it. I mean, so there was a lot I didn't know. So we've built now a entrepreneurship education program, both in the engineering school and in the business school, to prepare people who want to be leaders. And then I think there's something about the environment. You're with a lot of people who are interested in this kind of thing. They're constantly asking questions, and you drive out the back door of campus and you're on Sand Hill Road, the home of most of the big venture capital companies. So there's a lot of proximity that really makes it easier. And the fact, the other factor in this is when you look at these companies, so many of them will have new young talent that may come directly from the university, but they combine that with experienced talent that worked in the last startup that came out and bring an understanding of how to manage it. Maybe they're a CEO, maybe they're a VP of engineering. They bring kind of a understanding of really how to get a product out and make a successful company. And that fusion really increases the probability of success.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Just kind of circling back to your thoughts on, or just the curriculum that Stanford adopted for entrepreneurship. So we're actually all at Penn, and they have an entrepreneurship and innovation concentration here. But I've actually heard from a lot of students and professors this kind of like prevailing idea that entrepreneurship can't be taught. It's not something that you should be like learning at the undergraduate level. And what are your thoughts on this? Because I hear a lot of people saying it's better to just learn like a specific technical skill early on in college, and there's no reason to study business. I'm studying business. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think there is value to learning about entrepreneurship?
Sure, I think there's value in it. I don't think it's not rocket science, at least not compared to physics or electrical engineering or even computer science. So I think a little bit goes a long way, it turns out, I think. Particularly, a lot of courses now are built around experiential learning. Go through, your goal in this course is to build a business plan for a company and then sell it to a committee of judges, right? And that I think teaches many of the basic principles, and I think you can. So I think those things are certainly you can learn those things. The other skills that you might need in leadership to make a successful company are probably harder to learn than the entrepreneurship skills.
So you mentioned before that some of the things you didn't know, like reading a balance sheet or understanding the importance of sales. Do you think there are like specific skills or maybe a certain area of education that students who are looking to pursue entrepreneurship should focus on, like certain majors or certain programs?
Well, I think getting some experience in actually putting together, I mean, just putting together a pitch for a new idea. Basically, if you want to capture the interest of a leading venture capital firm, you have one piece of paper or 10 minutes to do it. And if you can't capture their interest in that time, then you're going to have a hard time really finding investors, at least from the premier firms. So I think being able to learning how to describe your idea in a way that's compelling, learning some of the basics about how to do a market analysis, figure out what total available market, and getting some notion of how the company is going to be successful, how much money you need to raise. I mean, all those things I think they're not really hard to learn. You can learn those probably in one or two good courses, and that prepares you then for being an entrepreneur.
So I think we've talked a lot about innovation and pursuing technological developments, but I wanted to ask you something a little bit more philosophical regarding innovation. And if you have any thoughts on what you think people or innovation should be driving toward, if there's so many disruptions in the world, do you think there's a higher purpose of all this technological advancement and a higher goal that I guess people should be pursuing with the things that they're innovating?
Well, I think people are driven to really discover something really important. We're talking today, just shortly after computer scientists won two of the Nobel Prizes, which was absolutely remarkable, and really shows you the power of machine learning as a technology, I think. So I think we'll continue to do that. I think I'm really hopeful that we can see AI be used for constructive purposes in society and to really help people succeed. So I'm a big believer that the goal of artificial intelligence should be to leverage and accelerate human ability, not just replace people. And in that way, we can think about how do we make people more effective? How do we give them jobs where they get to do more of what they like, and some of the drudgery and the work that's route work gets done by a computer. And I think we can get there. I think we can do things that are really dramatic improvements in our ability to make people effective.
Kind of going off of that, I have an interesting story. So I was at a club meeting and I was talking to one of my friends about like a philosophy class I'm in, even though I'm like a computer science major. And one of my other friends was like, "Oh, you take a philosophy class? That's not very useful." So I was with like five other people and we were debating for probably around an hour about the two different sides. So I'm wondering what your take on that is. If you believe taking a philosophy in general is useful. And I mean, obviously, I think his stance was pretty ridiculous, but I'm just wondering what you're thinking about that.
Of course it's useful. I mean, I think I think the purpose of undergraduate education in particular is to create a foundation on which you're going to build the rest of your life. And it's a foundation that should be both broad and deep at the same time, that should cover a variety of different fields, should help make you an educated citizen that can talk about various issues and talk about the complexities. And you think about the great work that's gone on in philosophy, and they're dealing with some of the real complexities. I mean, take issues of inequality and opportunity in the US. There are fundamentally great ways to ask about those questions that are philosophical in nature, Rawlsian, right? And so I think there's a lot to be said for that. Not, the philosophy course you're taking is going to provide you with a lifelong way of thinking about problems. The programming course you're taking, those particular skills, not the general notion of algorithmic thinking, which is what we teach in programming courses, but the skill of what the syntax is, how does the language work, that's going to be gone in 5 years because it'll be replaced by something new. So I think, thinking about what things are you learning that are going to be valuable, and are you learning? I think the other thing we really try to teach is learn how to be a lifelong learner. Learn how to be able to learn through the rest of your life, because you're all going to have careers which have multiple different phases to them and require you to learn and use knowledge in different ways. And so being able to do new things is crucial.
One more question. So, Jan LeCun, like one of the godfathers of AI, someone asked him, "What do you think students should be learning now?" And he said that it's important for students to be learning about things that have a long shelf life, similar to what you're saying. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. I think, with this explosion of machine learning, all of a sudden, a lot of computer scientists realize they don't know enough mathematics. They don't know enough linear algebra. They don't know. So I think it's a great lesson for people about those fundamental underpinnings and getting, as you said, the long shelf life.
I saw this kind of circling back to what you said about lifelong learning. I saw this really interesting, I think, article or probably blog post of some sort. And it's I've seen like there's this emerging trend right now in like undergraduate classes. You're assigned like a 30 to 50 page reading, and then people just upload it to ChatGPT to ask it to be summarized. And now it's happening like there's been an emergence of like 1 minute book summaries or um like really just trying to like expedite the learning process. And there's been kind of a debate going on around like, is this good? Is this bad? Is it better like to just feed our shortened attention spans? And what do you think, just going back to like the question, what do you think the implications are for lifelong learning, given like how kind of like do you think education should be tailored towards our shortening attention spans, or what do you think are the best ways to adapt, given how how different our brains are wired now?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, I think there is some value in the ability to summarize lots of information because we're certainly flooded with information. On the other hand, do I want to read the original thoughts of a great thinker? Yes, I want to read the original thoughts of a great thinker. And I want to see how he thought the way he thought and why she said what she said. So I think that's really important to understand, and to understand people's motivations and insights. And that's hard to get from a summarization. It seems too simplified and too removed from the original thoughts for me. So combination. We ask students to read a lot of material. Particularly in some undergraduate classes, so I'm not surprised that they sometimes want to go to the summarization. But getting the balance right is probably what's appropriate.
In terms of AI, are there any specific areas where you mentioned that line and that balance? Are there any specific areas of AI that you think shouldn't be used, AI shouldn't be applied, or like specific ethical challenges that you think we could be approaching with AI and machine learning?
Yeah. So the real problem we face in machine learning and AI is it's a software tool. Software tools are malleable by their very nature. They're universal. They can be used for lots of different things. And the problem is going to be that even tools which seem pretty innocent on their surface can be misused. So how we're going to deal with things like deep fakes and various other kinds of misinformation, I think is a real problem and a real concern. And somehow we're going to have to get it. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to say, okay, put your hand, close off the core technology development without destroying the opportunity that AI can really create in terms of improving human lives and productivity. So we're going to, and we do have existing laws that deal with some of these things, but we're going to have to think about other laws that deal with various issues that we don't currently have on the books. And it's going to challenge us, I think, because it's going to be, and there will be tugs of war between issues of potential damage to society from misinformation and right to free speech, as we've seen already. It's going to get worse in the AI era, not better. So we have to think carefully about, as a society, what do we want to do about that?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I remember last year in my English class, we were debating, we were reading Frankenstein and we were debating whether Frankenstein should have been allowed to make the monster. And a lot of things that were coming up were the ideas of AI and the misuse and gene editing and biotech and innovation. And it was really interesting seeing where us as students were defining where the line was and whether you can cross that line and where to draw that line. So I think it's really interesting that the debate is coming up again in terms of machine learning. And yeah, I think in terms of AI again, what are there any specific technologies outside of machine learning that you think are going to drive the next wave of innovation and where students or undergrads should be focusing their attention now?
The AI wave is so big, and still it's relatively recent, because this is really about the machine learning breakthroughs, which are a little more than a decade old. And so we're really just learning about it. There's going to be so much innovation around this, particularly, a lot of it will be applying the core technology in various sectors, right? Healthcare, teaching, education, other sectors. I think, there are a number of other things that I think are going to be really drivers here as we begin to get near the end of Moore's Law, which has been driving the computer industry for the last 50 plus years. We're going to need new innovations and inventions if we're going to continue to deliver. We're so used to computers getting faster every year and phones get better and all these sorts of things, but it's been driven by the integrated circuits industry. And as the semiconductor industry slows down, we're going to have to find other ways to innovate if we're going to continue to deliver on those dreams. And if we're going to build ever larger AI models. The models are growing so fast, and the computational effort involved in them is growing so fast, that we're going to have to find new ways to provide both the hardware as well as design better algorithms. So there's a lot of challenges ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on just the next wave of technology and machine learning. We're going to be shifting to more just your thoughts on leadership in general. So a lot of talks, especially like podcasts and talks like these, primarily focus on a leader's successes. But as I'm sure you know, a lot of times the biggest learning moments and oftentimes the biggest growth that a person can experience is through failure. So could you talk a little bit about a time where things didn't go as planned and some of the biggest lessons you learned?
Sure. The first startup that I started, as I said, I didn't know really what I should be doing in terms of the business side of it. So it was a time when it was hard to attract capable CEOs to Silicon Valley. It's not hard anymore. Everybody wants to come to Silicon Valley. But this was in the 80s. It was a challenging time. And we hired a CEO that started out and for the first year was pretty good, but then couldn't take the company to the next level and became increasingly alienated with the engineering workforce. And it was clear we had the wrong person. And the founders had to basically go and tell the board that we needed to replace the CEO. We picked the wrong person. He's not going to be able to do the job, and we're going to lose all our great engineering talent if we don't make some changes here. So that was really hard to do because we were young, we were all engineers, we had never built a company, and this guy this was his second startup. But we persuaded them that everybody was going to leave. Unfortunately, by the time we fixed that problem, the company was almost out of money. So we had to find a new CEO, persuade him to take the job, even though we had no money. And he did. He took it on a condition that we would do a layoff to realign the size of the company. That was really painful. We had about 120 employees, and we had to fire about 40 people out of 120. And when you only have 120 people in a startup, everybody knows everybody. So it was a kind of really challenging time for the company to, tell the remaining 80 people, this is going to be a successful company. It's going to be a successful company despite what we just had to do. But we managed that, and luckily we had enough really great engineering staff. And the second CEO we picked was the right one. So it all worked out in the end, but it was very difficult.
So you talked that story just is emanating with resilience. Could you talk a little bit about some other really important values you think are crucial to your journey, but you think are important in just young people's journey in general, whether it's like you just mentioned, resilience or grit or self-confidence?
Yeah, so resilience and grit are obviously important. Kind of knowing what your value system is and knowing what you're really being clear about what your goals are. So when you come to a difficult decision, you can really decide what needs to be done and how to do it. There was a big financial crisis in 2008, 2009. You're all too young to remember, but and the university lost about $7 billion from its endowment. So we had a gigantic financial crisis. We had made an announcement that we were going to make a major enhancement to undergraduate financial aid. And all of a sudden, we had about $100 million shortfall in the university's budget. And this commitment to make a big addition to financial aid. So we sat down and we said, we're going to have to make a hard decision. We're going to have to do something. We can't, if we're going to stick to that commitment to students, then we're going to have to cut something else in the university. And we ended up deciding that we were going to stick to our commitment to students. They were the life value. We were not going to fire any faculty, although we did freeze all faculty hiring. We were not going to fire any faculty. And we were going to have to lay off staff across the university in order to right the ship. But it was really about deciding what's your core value, and the core commitment in a university is to students and faculty. So that was the decision we made.
I think all throughout your journey, you've mentioned various different mentors and a value system that you stick by. Do you think there's any really important pieces of advice or adages that you stick by every day that you would like to give young leaders?
So one of the most valuable pieces of advice I got was when I was offered the Dean of Engineering job. And the outgoing dean, who I knew quite well, he was a colleague in electrical engineering, he said to me, don't take this job because it has a higher salary, or you have additional staff, or you like the office. Take it because you want to serve the students and the faculty in the engineering school. And that was a really good lesson, because it really said, leadership is a service role. You're serving the people that are in the organization you lead. And I have remembered that ever since. That was probably 25 years ago. 28 years ago, but I've remembered that lesson ever since. And every single job I've taken, I've thought about it that way. And it's been incredibly valuable. And it also has helped me remember that when I'm leading an organization, if the organization is thriving, I should feel great about it, because I'm helping to make sure the organization is thriving, and it makes the job very rewarding in that sense.
That's such a great leadership philosophy, leadership as service. I really like that. If this is our final question before the quick fire round, but if you were an undergraduate today or a young person in high school or even younger, What do you think are some like important things you wish that you would have done or you wish the next generation of leaders would do?
Um, so I think this is a time when, and it has been for some number of years, where it's very easy to get cynical about the world and conclude that you can't change things. If we're going to get change in the world and make the world better, I'll tell you one thing, it's going to come from young people being dedicated to that change. It's young people who change the world. It's why I've been a lifelong teacher, because I feel optimistic about the ability of young people to go out and change the world. And so if I can help young people prosper on that journey and help them achieve their goals to make the world better, then I feel good. And I think that's what you should be ambitious about, what you do in the world and the positive impact you leave on it.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears and now do our quick fire round where we're going to ask you a series of short, fun questions and you can answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Ready?
Okay.
Okay, what's your favorite book or author?
Dickens' Tale of Two Cities.
That's a classic. If you could collaborate with any historical figure on a modern problem, who would it be and what would you guys tackle together?
Abraham Lincoln, because the guy could do almost anything in a crisis. Inequality in the US.
What's a technological innovation you're most excited about right now?
People actually getting nuclear fusion to work as a practical power source.
What's one challenge you're still working to solve for yourself?
Figuring out how to help people, help students particularly interact with one another over difficult topics.
If you had to explain your philosophy towards life to a 10-year-old, what would you say?
Remember that when you get to be my age, what you're going to look back on is the people you've helped along the way, and that's what's going to make you feel good about your life.
What's a question you wish more people would ask you, but they don't?
More people ask me, but they don't. That's a really, I've never thought about it. What's the hardest thing you ever had to do?
Okay, now we're gonna ask that to you.
Oh, I think the hardest things I ever had to do were to lay off people, deliver a bad message to somebody. How do you deliver a bad message to people in a way that's as humane and as empathetic and as kind as can be, even though you're delivering a bad message?
If you could start your career over again, would you do anything differently?
I've been so lucky. I would be so lucky to have the same career twice.
What do you think is the biggest global challenge?
Climate change.
And finally, what's your favorite quote or mantra to live by?
There's a quote that's often ascribed to Socrates. It's apocryphal. It's not really a Socrates quote. And it says, I'll paraphrase it. It says something like, regard your reputation as your most precious jewel, because your reputation is like a fire. Once it's going, it can be kept vibrant and alive. But once extinguished, it will be very hard to reignite.
That's beautiful. Now we're gonna hand it off to Neetu for some final questions, and then we will wrap up this amazing conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hennessy, I must say this has been just absolutely fascinating. Just even listening to you, being in the same room, it's a total privilege and an an honor to host you today. And I have to say, the questions are not ending. We're getting so many questions from kids around the world. And I've got to ask you these questions before we let you go today. So I've got to take this chance. So I'm just going to read some of these questions that the children have sent in. I'm going to start with this one. It says, what resources Google is providing for students worldwide for innovation and entrepreneurship?
There's a brand new tool out called Notebook LM, which helps you learn and summarize things, and also has this great audio podcast feature where you can generate a podcast about virtually any topic you want. So I think it's a really great example of how to use this large language model technology for something in a really useful way.
I just used
Wow.
that to study for my midterm.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So, how else can we extend these great resources that Stanford is providing to all the other university students worldwide?
Well, I think we are trying through putting more and more course material online as ways to really share that. One of our earliest courses we put online was the machine learning course. It's now been taken by several 100,000 people have looked at that material, and that was at a time when there were not a lot of courses on machine learning, so it was really valuable. I think continuing to do that and sharing best practices in terms of learning new materials is an important thing that our universities can do.
Wonderful. Well, what do you think is the best education line for children who want to do innovation and entrepreneurship, whether it's computers, biology, engineering? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, I mean, biology is spectacular. What's happening in computer science now is really exciting. But I think there are going to be a lot of applications of machine learning in other disciplines that are really going to reignite their ability to move in innovative new ways. So I think this is going to be a universal tool.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I must ask, you're the chairman of Alphabet Google. How does Google stand apart from so many other companies? And what are the biggest challenges that you face for leading such a big company, probably the biggest in the world?
Yeah, it's not quite the biggest in the world. It's one of them, though. So I think Google has always emphasized excellence and innovation, and it really tries to empower the people, the Googlers, to really be able to do that. And that's kind of a core value for us. And we try to reinvent things constantly, not only improving the existing products, but create new products constantly. I think the biggest challenge in this company is to keep that innovation flame alive at a company of this scale. It's a really big company. So keeping the innovation flame alive is the key to its long-term success.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't think we can ever imagine a world without Google Alphabet. So thank you. I must ask, where do you see the best use of AI, physical health and mental health, wealth, considering, choosing better presidents or avoiding wars?
Yeah, I think the best use of this technology will be to enable people to make their own contributions better. So enable doctors to spend more time with patients and less time filling out forms. Enable teachers to spend more time working with students and less time maybe grading or preparing lessons. I think there are lots of examples of that form where get rid of the work that people really don't like in their jobs and let them focus on the parts of their jobs they like.
You do like, yeah, that's so true. Well, I must ask, do you have any final words for so many kids around the world?
The thing I used to tell incoming freshmen every year at Stanford was, look, you've got to find what you really love to do. And if you're really lucky, find that intersection between what you love to do and what you're good at. And if it's something you're really excited about, you'll get out of bed early on Saturday morning to go do it. And that will lead you to a life that's fulfilling because you'll do something you love and something you're good at. And if you can do that for the rest of your life, you'll have a great time.
Yeah, that's so wonderfully said. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Hennessy. This has been absolutely fascinating. Kids, do y'all have any other questions for Mr. Hennessy before we let him go today? Okay, looks like we are all good. I
Right.
just want to thank you on behalf of the kids who are listening, and of course, Gia, Karina, and Arman Gupta, who've put this show together. Thank you so much for your time, for your presence, Mr. Hennessy, and just for being here and for sharing all of this wealth of knowledge. What I loved most, I have to say this, was just your sheer presence, your energy, and for being so authentic. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thanks. And thanks for the great questions.
Absolutely.